and welcome to this general election debate for Congressional District 5. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Danielle Lerner, and I'll be moderating today's debate. Our format will be a little different today. We're hosting a 30-minute one-on-one discussion since only one candidate has agreed to participate. The incumbent, Republican Representative Andy Biggs, has declined our invitation. Thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission, Bitfire, and the Arizona Media Association, we are working to make sure all 2024 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this conversation will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. Transparency is critical here, and that's why this conversation has been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona, representing urban and rural communities. Thank you to voters across Arizona who have submitted questions. We've reviewed all of them to make sure every voice is heard. However, no candidate has been given advanced access to any of the questions. So with that, let's introduce the Democratic congressional candidate, Katrina Schaffner. Ms. Schaffner, welcome and thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you.
I'd like to start by giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the voters with your opening statement. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Katrina Schaffner, and I'm running for Congress to challenge a system that benefits the top and has left the rest of us behind. It's past time to hold billionaires and their price-gouging corporations accountable. I've worked in the trades, I've worked in corporate, and I've been a political activist my entire adult life. Andy Biggs is a wealthy man who serves even wealthier men. And I believe it's time to stop playing politics and start governing. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Schaffner, your district covers eastern Maricopa County and parts of northern Pinal County. You mentioned your opponent. He has been in Arizona government for about 20 years. He has held this seat in particular since he was first elected in 2016. What have you seen or heard as you've connected with voters in this district that shows you they're ready for a change?
Yes. A lot of voters are tired of the traditional way of politics, and our campaign is powered by people who want to see a change in our political system. And what we're seeing and hearing on the ground is that folks feel like government is not working for them, and this economy is not working for everybody. And they want someone who's actually going to be better representation. They want to know why someone like Andy Biggs, who's supposed to represent them, is part of the criminal conspiracy to overturn our elections. Why was he at an Oath Keepers event where they were calling to hang then Senator John McCain? As constituents, they deserve answers, and they're ready for someone who is willing to get into Congress and work for everyday families.
You did touch on the economy a bit there, so let's start with that top issue. Right now, so many Arizonans are struggling. At one point, Phoenix had the highest rate of inflation in the nation. It has since come down, but what are your plans, some concrete steps to help bring some of those rising costs down so that the average consumer can get some relief?
Yeah, I know what that's like. We have seen prices go up, and wages have not increased with inflation. And families are struggling. Everyday families are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet, to go to the grocery store. I know what that's like, to sit up at night wondering how you're going to pay the rent, to skip meals so you can feed your children. People are having a really hard time because, like I said, this economy doesn't work for everybody. And we have someone like Andy Biggs representing us, who is passing massive tax breaks for the wealthy at the top, skyrocketing our national debt. We need working representation, someone who is going to fight for everyday families and put working people and families first. not someone who is out there fighting for more tax break for the richest people in this country. And so when I get to Congress, I am going to prioritize everyday people, everyday families, and making sure that we are holding corporations accountable so that they are paying their fair share.
Now, the Congressional Budget Office is projecting a federal budget deficit of $1.9 trillion for fiscal year 2024. Your opponent has actually said that reining in government spending and fiscal responsibility are top priorities. What's your take on the federal budget, and how should those dollars then be managed and spent?
Yeah, he would say that when he's passing tax breaks that are skyrocketing the debt. What we need to do is hold corporations accountable so we can invest in small businesses, working people, and families. There are a lot of different ways that we can do this, but my opponent continues to vote against tax breaks for everyday people. He voted against small businesses during the pandemic. And when a small business starts to struggle, it is harder to get back on their feet. So we need to make sure that we're taking those investments and putting it into smaller businesses, putting it into local economies so that everybody can feel like they have some financial security. And right now, people are not feeling that. We want to make sure that those resources are actually going down to everyday people and that you're actually feeling it in your everyday life.
And of course, housing is a big part of this as well. You've been very open about your passion for that issue. A recent poll by the Center for the Future of Arizona shows that 78% of all likely voters do want to increase affordable housing in their community. How do you help make that a reality, especially right now when prices and interest rates are so high?
Yeah, a lot of people, especially younger generations, they don't believe in the American dream anymore. They can't start their families. They can't buy their homes. The interest rates are skyrocketing. And again, Andy Biggs continues to vote for tax breaks for the top. This is why working representation is so important, because we need someone who understands that we need to build more competition in this economy to bring those prices down. And that's just one big piece of the puzzle. We have a lot of work to do, but we need to be supporting small builders. And again, ensuring that that is coming to our local economy and that federal funding is going to people who need it the most. Everyday families, working people who just cannot get by and are living paycheck to paycheck. That's what we need in Congress, because we need someone who understands how federal government is impacting our day-to-day lives. That includes housing, because our senior citizens are also struggling with affordable housing, and they are getting left behind as well. So we need someone who's ready to tackle those corporations and ensure that we are building that competition, that we are giving breaks to people who cannot get on their feet.
Well, in this district in particular, I mean, the East Valley has seen such a boom in apartment buildings and rentals. President Biden this summer proposed a national rent cap of no more than 5% per year. There are new laws in Oregon and California enacting rent control. Is that something you support? And if so, how would you work to pass something like that through when it's known historically to be one of the most divisive issues among lawmakers when it comes to housing policy?
Yes, we've had rent control in the past, and it was proven very effective. So that is absolutely something that we can look at to help bring those prices down. I think the bigger issue here, though, is that we have a small percentage of corporations and large builders who are driving the market, and we need to get a handle on that. Otherwise, anything else that we do isn't really going to impact everybody in a significant way. So we need to tackle the bigger issues so that people actually feel it in their wallets every month when they're going to pay the bills.
And you mentioned some of those builders. The process to build affordable housing is complicated. It can be lengthy. It can be expensive. As someone who would be advocating for federal funds, what, in your opinion, can be done to help streamline that process?
Yes, this goes back to ensuring that we are supporting small builders, because small builders are what's going to build that competition. Right now, these corporations and these largest builders are controlling the market by controlling how fast the houses are being built, what the prices are, how quickly the material is coming into use that, and how quickly they are going up. And so they are able to manipulate the market, driving all the other smaller builders out of business. So this just really goes back to the overall perspective of our economy and who do we want to support? How do we want to strengthen our economy? And for me, it's building our economy from the ground up to build that strong foundation and supporting those smaller businesses, and in this case, small builders.
You mentioned small businesses. You also mentioned seniors just a moment ago, so I want to circle back to that. Social Security and Medicare are often lifelines for the elderly, survivors, also people with disabilities. Funds are set to run out as early as 2035 if Congress doesn't take action. You have said that you support expanding and protecting both programs, but what sorts of concrete steps would you take to make that happen?
So yeah, our senior citizens are struggling. We're seeing Medicare is still expensive, Social Security is just not enough, and we have folks like Andy Biggs who are trying to make cuts to Social Security. These MAGA Republicans in Congress do not care about people who have paid into Social Security for a lifetime so that they can retire with dignity. We need to expand Medicare to cover hearing, dental, vision. These are just basic needs that people need as they get older, and they have a right to retire with dignity, to affordable housing, because right now we're seeing seniors who are struggling to stay in their homes. And we can lift the cap on Social Security so that everyone is paying their fair share. And when we work a lifetime, again, we can retire and retire with dignity.
Let's move to immigration. Of course, one of the other big issues, not just here in Arizona, but across the country as well. How would you characterize the current situation at the border, and what, if anything, would you do differently?
I remember in 2019, we saw those images of a father crossing the Rio Grande with his toddler daughter. And they were found face first in shallow water with the little girl holding onto his back. I just think and imagine what they must have been going through, that he was willing to risk everything for his daughter because they had no other choice in the matter. We have challenges at the border that we have to address. And unfortunately, this has turned into a political playbook for politicians to use this issue, throw it in their pocket come election year. And we've seen that play out this year with MAGA Republicans in the House who killed the bipartisan border bill just to give Donald Trump a win so that Democrats didn't have a win. We absolutely have to pass the funding in this bill. It addresses Border Patrol and helps provide the resources that they need, the funding that they need, and the technology that they need to do their jobs properly. It tackles the fentanyl crisis, which hurts everyone from every background and every socioeconomic status. And we cannot continue to let a very good bill sit there so that MAGA Republicans can play political games. And this is a perfect example of why we need someone who's ready to stop playing politics and ready to start governing.
Now, some Republicans might argue that immigration was a serious issue before that bill was voted down. So do you think something could have or should have been done sooner than that?
I think that we have seen funding go to the border and could have been done sooner. The challenge is that we need bipartisan support. We need people willing to work together. And unfortunately, in this political climate, what we're seeing is that Andy Biggs, for example, he won't even work within his own party to get legislation passed, let alone across the aisle. We absolutely can do more if we're willing to put politics aside and support people who need it. That includes funding this border crisis.
And I think most voters have said that they want to see bipartisanship. They want to see working across the aisle. You mentioned the current political climate. It's heated, it's divisive. How do you plan to work across the aisle and work alongside lawmakers who maybe don't share your viewpoint?
So as a political activist, I've been doing this for a long time. And I think it starts with having an open mind, holding ourselves accountable, and being able to listen to all perspectives. Too many people in Congress right now are sitting there with yes men surrounding them. They're not willing to bring everyone to the table to have real debates, real discussion, as we've seen here tonight, since I'm the only one here. So it is really important when we are voting that we are voting for people who genuinely care about these issues and want to work across the aisle. And as a political activist, I have done that, and I have sat with Republicans across the aisle. I have sat with congressional offices from across the political spectrum, and we can always find ways to come together. As we've seen where in the past, someone like Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders were able to work together on a Yemen bill. It can be done if you have folks who genuinely care and actually are willing to put that aside to pass legislation.
One of the other big issues, of course, going into this election is abortion. You have been vocal about your stance on abortion, saying that Congress needs to codify Roe v. Wade into law and that the government should never come between a patient and their doctor. Now, in your opinion, are there any circumstances where you think some type of an abortion ban should be put in place?
It seems like every day we are hearing more and more about women who are bleeding out in parking lots at the hospital because doctors cannot do their jobs. A woman in Ohio was arrested for having a miscarriage. It is unbelievable to me that this is where we are today. And Andy Biggs wants a federal abortion ban. He wants to ban contraception and wants to punish fertilization clinics where you would go to get IVF treatments. I would absolutely always support our reproductive freedoms, whether it's abortion, contraception, IVF, because never should a politician come in between you and your doctor. Never.
So just to clarify, do you think there should ever be any type of an abortion ban put in place, whether that's by term or a certain point in the pregnancy?
No, I think we need to restore Roe v. Wade and go back to those standards. And we've had it for 50 years. We should go back to that.
And Arizonans will be voting on this particular issue coming up here soon.
Yes.
Do you think that this should be something that's in the state's hands, or should it stay a federal issue?
Well, as we've seen with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, we are hearing more and more of these stories that I was mentioning before. So it absolutely has to be a federal issue because we cannot afford to see more and more women struggling to get the health care that they need. Doctors have restrictions on the care that they can provide to their patients. That is not a healthy economy. It is not a healthy ecosystem for any of us in any situation. So yes, I support a federally supporting Roe v. Wade.
Okay. Let's switch gears and talk about climate for a moment. 2024's summer, the hottest on record in Arizona, as we've all been feeling. We also saw the most consecutive days with a high above 100 degrees. What is your take on climate change?
Yeah, gosh, it is hot. It's so hot right now. And what we've seen is that it's just getting hotter. We're having this drought with this water crisis here in Arizona, wildfires more and more every summer, people having to flee their homes. I saw an evacuation earlier today over by Tortilla Flats. It is devastating to see the impact that we're seeing in our day-to-day lives because of this extreme weather. And when we have people like Andy Biggs who don't listen to the science, who deny climate change, and completely ignore any action, we are going to continue to see people struggle, have to leave their homes. Their homes have been burned down. They have no water. So we need to tackle this now before it gets even worse. And we can do that, again, by coming together, working together, supporting infrastructure so that we can actually tackle this crisis head on and get ahead of it before it's too late.
Now, many Republicans, when it comes to this issue, would argue that the government should be pulling back on regulations. What do you propose then can be done to negate some of the challenges associated with, as you said, climate change?
Supporting our economy. We can do both. We can invest in infrastructure and different energy sources so that we can actually tackle this issue and invest in our economy. And it really doesn't have to be one or the other. We can do both if we stop making this so political, look at the facts, look at the science, and understand that all we really need to do is invest in a variety of energy sources, and it will bring new and good paying jobs to Arizona.
Now, education is another hot button issue, especially here in Arizona, but also across the country. In your opinion, what is the federal government's role when it comes to education?
Our teachers, our students, they are overworked and overwhelmed right now. They are not getting the support, the resources, the materials that they need for their classrooms. They're not getting the social support from our communities. And they are feeling it every day where teachers have to use their own money, their own funds to pay for materials that their students need. And Andy Biggs wants to make it that much harder. He wants to eliminate the Department of Education. He wants to defund public schools, which will just put more and more strain on teachers and students who are just trying to get an education. We have to do more. We need to provide the resources that teachers need for their classrooms. Get them the training that they need so that they can better serve all the students and serve the needs of all of their students in their classrooms. Whether that's materials that they need, education, or mental health care.
And so much of that comes down to funding, of course. Arizona has some of the worst per pupil education spending in the country. Actually, a recent Wallet Hub report put us at 49th. When it comes to our public schools and that need for funds that you mentioned, what can be done to improve that? What sorts of concrete plans do you have to help turn that around?
This goes back to holding people accountable, especially these large corporations. If they were paying their fair share, and if billionaires were paying their fair share, we could invest in our communities. Instead, Andy Biggs is passing massive tax cuts for them, driving up our deficit. So of course, we need to hold them accountable. Make sure they're paying their fair share so we can invest in our communities so that our teachers are supported, our students are getting the care that they need and deserve.
All right, we have about 1 minute left before we get to your closing statement.
Okay.
You touched on this a little bit in your opening. You haven't held elected office before. In fact, this is your first time running for public office. What do you say to those who may feel like you don't have the experience for this type of position?
I grew up in a blue-collar family. My dad was a carpenter. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. And like I said before, I worked in the trades. I worked in corporate America. And I've been a political activist. And I believe that provides me a unique perspective because I understand how federal policy impacts our day-to-day lives and how government should impact our day-to-day life. Andy Biggs won the lottery and used it to amplify his political career. And he is serving billionaires and their price gouging corporations instead of constituents and everyday families. I will always put everyday families first. Working people and families must come first in Congress, and too many politicians have put up these blind spots and are completely out of touch with reality.
And Ms. Schaffner, it's now time for closing statements. I want to be sure to give you, a moment for your closing statement.
Great. So I mentioned this a couple times already, but Andy Biggs is serving the billionaires and he's serving those price gouging corporations that are driving off the cost of our groceries. We need working representation in Washington, D.C. Someone who understands what it's like to earn a living. Someone who can compromise without compromising our values. And it is time to stop playing politics and start governing. And if you'd like to learn more, you can go to my website at katrinaforarizona.com. Thank you.
Ms. Schaffner, thank you for being here today. That is all the time that we have for today's one-on-one conversation with candidates for Congressional District 5. On behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister, and Bitfire Studios, thanks for joining us.